All right, there's a lot of developments to talk about. Let's bring in Florida Congressman Michael Waltz. He is a member of the House Armed Services, Foreign Affairs, and Intel committees. Congressman, thank you for hanging with us through the briefing. Sure. We appreciate it. I wanted to ask you about this letter that was sent to President Biden by some 400 political appointees and government staffers across 40 government agencies. It was viewed by the New York Times. It's highly critical of President Biden's Israel policy. It says, quote, in part, we call on President Biden to urgently demand a ceasefire and to call for de-escalation of the current conflict by securing the immediate release of the Israeli hostages and arbitrarily detained Palestinians, the restoration of water, fuel, electricity, and other basic services, and the passage of adequate humanitarian aid to the Gaza Strip. The pressure within the administration is building on this president. Do you expect that he will remain resilient in the face of it or cave?
Well, first, John, I just want to give credit where credit's due, and to see the bipartisan Republican and Democrat support for Israel at the Israel rally out in Washington, D.C. was reassuring. But yeah, this letter, 400 of Biden's political appointees calling for a ceasefire and criticizing him. You know, I could tell you under the Trump administration, everybody knew who the commander-in-chief was. And what I guess we have the prisoners running the prison here. And what's so disturbing is we know, the Israelis are telling us, we have analytics that show that Russian and Chinese actors are perpetuating this misinformation about what's going on under Gaza. And those same people seem obsessed about it in 2016 in the election, but I guess they're just believing their own misinformation. At this point, we know, of course, Hamas is using human shields. Of course, they're using hospitals. There are multitudes of video and photos from underneath schools, mosques, and hospitals, which is a war crime in and of itself. So it is phenomenally disturbing to me that the people charged with our foreign policy are buying into Russian and Chinese misinformation and then pressuring their own commander-in-chief who appointed them to go down this disastrous path of a ceasefire.
Congressman, to your point taken about the Trump administration, nobody questioned who was in charge. However, there were plenty of people who were embedded within these agencies and departments who were dishing dissension about the president's policies at every opportunity they possibly could have.
Yeah, John, that's why we call it the deep state, and that's why truly we need to clean house there. And at the end of the day, the commander-in-chief in the executive branch is the only one elected. Everybody else is appointed and serves at his pleasure or as a civil servant. They didn't put their name on the ballot. If they want to go start dictating policy, then go run for office.
I wanted to ask you about this independent assessment that was articulated by John Kirby aboard Air Force One and again by Sabrina Singh at the Pentagon. That U.S. intelligence now has separately confirmed and apparently downgraded top secret intelligence that Hamas is indeed using these hospitals for military purposes and is intentionally using people who work in the hospitals or people who are patients there as human shields. What do you say?
Well, I'm glad the administration's doing this. This is the war of ideas and a counter Hamas, China and Russia's and Iran's propaganda that we need to do to show that evidence, number one. And then number two, of course, John, anybody who has dealt with the Taliban, Al-Qaeda, Hamas, knows the evil that's at play here. We know, and the Israelis are telling us and showing us that Hamas is shooting people in the humanitarian corridors. They are forcing people to stay in harm's way. They are forcing people to stay in the hospital. The Israelis told us they offered a field hospital, move the patients out, and we'll help take care of them. But Hamas is forcing them to stay in Al-Shifa because they know that at the end of the day, they care more about the propaganda value than they do their own people's lives. So what we need to be talking about, what we should hear from the president, is how do we liberate the Palestinian people from Hamas, not the other way around.
Yeah, so there would seem to be a little question, if you believe the U.S. intelligence, that Hamas is using these hospitals for military purposes. The bigger question is, other than evacuating all of the patients, and I don't know logistically how you do that, and then leveling the place, what do you do about it?
Well, this is, I mean, I had to do this in Afghanistan. You have to go in surgically and take these people out as best you can. I'll point out to all of those protesters out there on every college campus, there is a difference between what Hamas did in targeting and torturing, intentionally killing civilians, and civilians that are harmed as part of collateral damage in a war that Hamas started. You have to do the best you can. It puts the IDF in a horrible situation. And of course, the terrorists know that. That's why they do it.
Yeah. Well, I would hazard a guess that if you attacked a hospital that had civilians in it to get to Hamas, you'd be in a heap of international condemnation. We'll see what they could do. Very difficult nut to crack, that one, no question. Congressman, good to catch up with you. Thanks for joining us. Thanks for hanging with us again.